Hello and welcome to the World Wanders podcast, your source for travel stories, travel destinations, and travel philosophy.
I'm Amanda.
I'm Ryan.
And we're your hosts.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today we are very excited to share an interview with Christopher Schacht.
Yeah, Christopher is the author of Around the World on $50, How He Left with Little and Returned a Rich Man. And I was really intrigued by this when we got connected with him because the idea of spending only $50 a day is challenging to me. And Christopher spent, just $50 in general in his bank account. And he came on the show to tell us all about his plan, why he did this, how he made it work, his different adventures from, crossing entirely by land or by boat around the world, and how this journey that he thought might be a couple of months led to a couple of years, and ultimately what he got out of it as personal growth.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating to hear from Christopher in many ways because it kind of contrasts against some of the things that we do traveling. I think that whenever you're traveling, you're kind of always in this balance of trying to find ways that push you out of your comfort zone while trying to find things that keep you, feeling good about continuing to travel. And sometimes as travelers, with all the technology and tools and resources we have at our hands now, it can be easy to get kind of locked up in your comfort zone and not doing some of the things, not taking some of the risks that really make travel such a magical experience. And so it was really fun to hear from Christopher about how that money constraint led to all of these amazing experiences, whether that's jobs he worked, hitchhiking, finding an opportunity to work on boats, traveling around across the Atlantic, across the Pacific, all over the world in really interesting ways because of this financial constraint that he placed on himself. So really excited to share this interview. I think everybody is going to love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, this was a reminder of how important it is for us to really travel in a way that makes us feel good. And so there's really no wrong way to travel. The fact that we travel different from the way that Christopher travels is totally fine. And if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't travel like either of you guys, that's also fine. But I think it's so cool to hear of a story of somebody who just really followed their passion and their dreams and was able to get so much different growth and experience out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely no right way to travel. Travel is about doing what makes you happy. And it's about finding the ways that you can do that while exploring the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And just quickly before we dive into the interview, we wanted to give a quick little shout out to our newest community members with the World Wanders Insider. Welcome, Veronica, and welcome, Adam. We are really excited to have you guys on board and also super excited that you're currently in Mexico City, enjoying all the things we love about Mexico City for us. And if you guys are curious about the World Wanders Insider and want to join the community, what we're doing over there is releasing a special insider-only podcast on how to become a digital nomad. So there's 4 episodes out already. There's a new episode coming out every single month. These episodes are not going to be released on the regular feed. They're for community members only. And if you are interested in learning more about digital nomad life from digital nomads like ourselves and other special guests that we've had on the show, you can head on over to patreon.com/The World Wanders to join the community.
Now here's the episode.
Christopher, welcome to the podcast today. We're super excited to have you here with us.
Hello, so am I.
And where are you joining us from today?
Right now, I'm in my living room here in Germany, in Frankfurt, very close to Frankfurt, where I study.
Ah, amazing. I've been to Frankfurt one time many, many years ago, like 2008, and it was definitely an interesting city to experience.
Yeah, Germany has got its sides. So actually, being from here, you don't really know how beautiful it is, or you don't appreciate it until you've been out for a while, and then you come back and say, wow, look at this, everything's so green. And yeah, so I really like the area.
Yeah, I think we can definitely relate to that being Canadian as well. It's Canada's so beautiful, but when it's just what you see every day or you haven't experienced something else, you don't really realize. Plus, it's super cold there, so it's like nice to have some appreciation for the things that you were grown up with.
Yeah, we share the cold.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, reading your book, I was enjoying when you talk about like your first warm Christmas, and I was like, oh, I remember my first warm Christmas too. It's so funny because you don't think about like we lived in Atlanta, Georgia for nearly a year, a couple years back, and they make like these weird sort of there's like little hills and they'll like make fake snow so that kids can go tobogganing, but it's like so warm that they don't need snowsuits or anything. I was like, huh, it's so interesting because you never think about the fact that there's like kids out there who don't experience like winter.
Yeah, snow and all that. Actually, when I was in Ecuador and at the Chimborazo, it's a volcano about 6,300 meters high. There we went to up to 5,200 meters and had a snowball fight with the Ecuadorians. This was kind of the only way how they could experience snow. So many Ecuadorians didn't in their life, but at some places when you get above 5,000 meters of altitude, even at the equator, there is snow because it's always below 0 degrees. So that's the only way, unfortunately. But we are very fortunate. We've got 4 seasons. It's a very seldom thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to dive into your big adventure. But before we do, was travel something that was always on your mind? Or when you started thinking about travel, did that kind of correlate to, having the idea of the big trip? And was that kind of like the first travel move?
So I grew up in a family where no one is a traveler. All of my family lived in the northern parts of Germany. I've got about 13 or 14 cousins, and all of them are pretty close around the area of Hamburg, and no one ever left the country. And with my family, we went to Denmark on holidays, which is like a 2 hours drive since we are already in the north of Germany. It's not very far. And this was my childhood, growing up always in the same area, seeing the same pastures, the same sheep, and the same rain, always from the front. Somehow this is what North Germany is like, even though the people are great. And then somehow, even though you might not think that I have a traveling gene in my family, which certainly doesn't exist there, with about 13 or 14, I already had the dream to go out and see something else, experience good weather, which is so rare in our place. And I wanted to get to know the people, get to know the cultures, also get out of the stressful work life that we have here. So that became stronger once I approached about 18 or 19 years of age. And then I was about to finish my school. And I had so many exams and all of that, and did a little job after school to sort of fund my equipment for the upcoming travel. But especially in that time, I just wanted to break out and be free and not knowing what's ahead, but just live day by day and moment by moment. So this sort of longing for adventure, longing to get out and do something and see the world became stronger, but started with, let's say, 14 years of age. And when I was 17, I was so much waiting for it that I was literally ready to break up school and get out. And my parents, of course, told me, no, you're never going to do that. And like this, we never let you leave. So first finish your school and then we can talk about it. I had about 2 years almost from 17 till 19 to prepare, and then I left.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And when you told your parents, like, hey, I'm going to do this around the world trip, like, what were their reactions, having not really traveled too much and having at 17 being like, you're not going right now?
Yeah, so actually when I was 17, they were pretty calm with it. They said, okay, all young guys have got some stupid ideas, and probably this is your stupid idea, but don't worry, it will go away. You will get healed, don't worry. But then about 2 years later, and meanwhile, I had learned Spanish just in preparation for that. I got my vaccines. I had done this small job after school to buy myself a backpack and all the clothes that I needed and traveling equipment. And they started to see that I was pretty serious about these plans. And then they got together with me and we sat at one table and they asked me, Christopher, are you serious about this? You really want to do it? That was just about 2 weeks before I started. And I told them, yes, mom, dad, this is really what my heart longs for. And that's my dream. And I would be so sad knowing that my whole life I missed what I really wanted to do. So right now is the time, and now I'm going to do this. And I know it might be dangerous, and I might risk my life even. But I'd rather die knowing that I pursued what I really wanted to do in life, than sitting the whole life in an office and just thinking, oh my gosh, the life is just passed aside me, but I didn't really live it. So that was the kind of the talk that I had with my parents, and they said, okay, we can understand that, even though we don't like it, but then go ahead and take care, watch out, of course. And that was it.
Oh yeah, I think it's so cool having such conviction and clarity at that point in time, where I think a lot of people, maybe it takes a while, right? Like maybe they do some type of half measure, and then they go do some other stuff they don't really like, and then it takes them a while before they get that realization of like, I've got to go for it. So it's really cool to hear that story about like being able to have that, drive and clarity to say like, this is really important to me, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, honestly, you need it. You need it, really. So because there are moments, especially if you travel on a really low budget like I did, where you think, oh, is this really worth it? I've now gone days without anything to put my teeth into that tastes good. Just had oats and water for, I don't know, 5 or 6 days in a row. And then you sleep in a wet sleeping bag because you've been up in the mountains and it's only been raining the whole time. It's cold and all that. And then you really feel, what am I doing here? Is this the right place to be? And if you don't have the passion and the drive, then you might quit. But if you do, then you say, okay, that's part of the deal. And I said I wanted this, so now I'm going through it.
Yeah, so what was that initial plan? What were you thinking in terms of direction and destination? And what were you thinking in terms of timeline, like right before you started?
That's the same question my mother asked. She said, okay, Christopher, when are you going to be back and how long will it take? And I said, Mom, I don't know. So it might be 2 years, might be 3 years, might be 1 year, might be more, might be less. I don't know. If I give you a time frame, then as soon as the time frame has passed, you're going to pin me down on it and say, Christopher, you told me you're going to be back by Christmas this year. Where are you? And I do want to avoid this trouble, so I will need as long as I need. That was sort of my time idea, even though in my mind, secretly, I thought probably about 2 years. Turned out to be the double of that. But so I traveled 4 entire years without returning home, without seeing my family for the entire time. And it was a really great time. So when I started, I didn't really have a fixed route. I just had a few spots in my mind that I wanted to see. Part of that was, for example, Paris and Barcelona in Europe. But then I also wanted to travel a big ocean and sail. And I did that. I crossed 5 of the 7 seas, which is pretty crazy looking back. And I wanted to see South America.
Look on a map.
Yeah. I wanted to see South America, and especially places like Rio de Janeiro and all these spots you see in films. But then once you get going, there's so many new spots opening up and so many new desires that you have, and let's say small dreams within the big dream.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, like, where did you get the idea from to travel on a really low budget? Or I guess like maybe it came out of necessity. You can maybe tell us, but I'm just curious, like, I feel like it's like so scary to think about being like young and not having seen the world before, and then also not having that like financial, I guess, like security blanket to fall back on.
Yeah, since we've got the internet, you read articles from time to time of people who traveled with little or no money from one place to another. And I thought, okay, when they can get from here to, I don't know, Greece or whatever, from Germany to Greece, some people even got to India in the 70s and whatever, then why shouldn't I be able to do that? And if you can go from here to India overland and with almost no money, then it should theoretically be possible for me as well to do the same thing around the whole world. And I knew I wasn't able to afford a whole world journey, so this was sort of the only way to go. And then at the same time, it makes traveling so much more interesting, because when you know that you need to work along the way, you really depend on talking to the natives and talking to the locals and ask them your way around, and probably also ask them if they know anywhere where you could just work for a few days and do some day labor to get some money again and stuff like this. So I knew I also had to learn the language, and it's just gonna be way more exciting like that. And that's the way I imagined it, and also the way it came to be.
Yeah, that's super, super, super inspiring to hear. I mean, we've traveled on like a budget, but definitely not like 50 euros for 4 years type budget.
It's also really depends on the character. You need to be the kind of person doing that. So I might I might not look like it, but it's sort of like extreme sport. Some people, they really like to get to the borders and challenge themselves and push themselves even beyond that, and then others rather stay in the comfort zone, and that's more their type of thing. And you cannot really say that one thing is favorable over the other. It just depends on what type of person you are. And I had a lot of people traveling with me for about 2 weeks, and I had small, let's say, traveling companionships over the time. And I think the longest was about 1 month with a French person that I really got close with, and he's a really good friend by now. And he's also been on my wedding, actually. Came to visit. We had 15 to 17 nations on our wedding, my wife's and mine. But when you travel with those kind of people, you realize very soon that, well, yeah, the traveling attitudes and ways are different. For example, this French person, even though we get along very well, I slept outside of my tent, and he got into a hotel or a youth hostel, usually a youth hostel, and I just ate my cheap food, and he said, "Come on, Chris, I'm French. I need good food." And then he went, I don't know, in Peru into a restaurant and had these 4 different kinds of llama meat and these tastings. And they were all very small portions. And I said, okay, I wouldn't want to enjoy all these different flavors in such a small size. I just want to have enough. And that's it for me. I love good food, but the best food in my mind is enough. So my wife, when we got to know each other, asked me, "What is your favorite food?" And I said, "Enough." And that's sort of also a character trait that I have that not many people share. But yeah, it helped.
And so you start out from Germany, and what does that route look like the first few months?
I went westwards, first to the Netherlands, and since I just started with 50 euros right at the beginning, it was sort of the hardest time to get along with such little on such a little budget. So actually, in the very first night, Amsterdam is famous for having a good nightlife. So at my very first night when I got there with a Swedish couple who were doing a road trip around Europe, they told me, "Christopher, come on. We took you around hitchhiking here to Amsterdam, and now let's go out together partying and exploring the city." And I said, okay, why not? It was my very first night. They let me sleep in their car and let my bag and luggage there. And then we went off into the city center and to the nightlife districts. And the next day, I woke up in the car. It was about 9 a.m. and the sun was shining into the inner room and heating it up. And I opened the door for some fresh air as I got up, because my head was aching so much. I had such a strong headache, and was grabbing to a bottle of water to get some sips. from there, and then reaching out into my pocket to see how much money I had left. And then after counting, I realized I had spent 35 of my $50 that I started with just in the very first night. And I thought, no way. So how did I do that? I can't even remember. I just spent $35 on my very first night on alcohol and weed and whatever.
French fries and mayo.
Yeah, and all that. And I can't even remember, but it wasn't a very good start. So I had actually, I could have said I started with $15 around the world, because I lost my first 35 on the very first night in Amsterdam. Happens to others as well. I heard stories of people losing more, so probably I was fortunate. But yeah, then I needed to get a job, and I was working as a party tour guide then in Amsterdam. That was the first and easiest thing to get. For about 1 month after that, I continued to Paris, and now I set myself a limit of at maximum $5 a day that I would spend on food and transport and whatever. And like this, I got to learn how to travel with less. And then I even underscored these $5 a day a lot of times, and got around even cheaper than that, and continued to Spain. We have the Mediterranean Sea at the Strait of Gibraltar going into the Atlantic Ocean, and this is exactly where at the Strait of Gibraltar, where a lot of boats are preparing for the crossing. And knowing that, and never having sailed before, but having this big sailing dream, I went there to look for a sailing boat to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. And I'd gotten this idea from a Polish hitchhiker who I met on my way there. And I've also been working for about 2 months in Spain on a horse ranch. And luckily, I met a sailing teacher on this horse ranch who, over the time of these 2 months when I was working there, already taught me a little bit. So now I got to this Gibraltar point, and within 1 week, actually, I found a boat to cross the Atlantic Ocean. And then we sailed away into the Caribbean. It took us about 1 to 3 months to get there. I say 1 month because that was the sailing time overall, but 3 months because we were stopping by the islands, like Canary Islands, Cape Verde, and then in the Caribbean, we started at Grenada. And from there, I made my way with a different sailing boat south to South America, where in Venezuela, I stayed in the jungle with the Native Americans for some time, the Indios, and went further down until Chile, and then returned. It took me 1 entire year to make my way around South America and experience a lot of great things. And after that, crossed the the Pacific Ocean from Panama at the Panama Channel to Asia, and from Asia over the Middle East back to Europe. So that was sort of the way I went.
Wow, that's amazing. And so when you mentioned like switching boats in the Caribbean, was that next part of the journey all on the same boat, or how did you kind of go about getting from place to place?
In the whole 4 years, I was working on about 8 different boats. So this first one was an Italian boat, for which I learned Italian. I was just able to speak Spanish at that point, but luckily Spanish and Italian are similar enough that at first we got along. And these are private sailing yachts, and there are every year always some, let's say, wealthy entrepreneurs or whatever who want to fulfill their childhood dream to sail around the world, and they bought a yacht with their money and now started to sail their route, but then start to realize, okay, if you do it with one person or two person, probably it's still very exhausting and tiring. So many of them, they will take crew on board over the time, especially for the long trips. And that was my opportunity, because this Italian guy had waited for his friends for about 2 months now in Gibraltar there, but they would not come because one of them didn't get free for holiday from work, and the other one first wanted to leave, but then I think had gotten a child or whatever, so it wasn't really really able to. And that was my fortune. And yeah, then I first started with these Italian people into the Caribbean. And since they wanted to go up the Northern Islands and I wanted to go south to South America, I switched boats to Swiss boat. And then in the Pacific Ocean, I was on a Norwegian boat and a South African boat. And in the East Chinese Sea, working on a Russian boat. Later on in the Indian Ocean on a German boat. So all sorts of nationalities.
That's really cool.
Hey everyone, we're just taking a quick little break from the podcast.
This episode is brought to you by Away. Away creates thoughtful products designed to change how you see the world. They started with the perfect suitcase, crafted with the features that make travel more seamless. Now they offer a range of essentials that solve real travel problems, so all you have to think about on your travels is where you're headed to next.
This was our travel experience with our Away suitcase on our most recent trip to Boquete in Panama. It was the perfect size, completely functional, and allowed us to take everything that we needed for a weekend trip away without having to pay any extra baggage fees. Everyone likes to travel differently, and Away offers a range of suitcases made of different materials in a variety of colors and sizes. So whoever you are and whatever you need to pack, Away has luggage that will help you make your next trip more seamless.
We both really love how durable the suitcase is, knowing all our stuff will be safe, and how the 360-degree wheels make it really easy to roll around and change direction when you're moving to and from your ride to the check-in counter.
Absolutely. So if you're ready to start your risk-free 100-day trial and shop the entire Away lineup of travel essentials, including their best-selling suitcases, head on over to awaytravel.com/wanderers and use the code wanderers to get $20 off your next purchase. Once again, it's awaytravel.com/wanderers and use the code wanderers when you check out to get $20 off your purchase.
Traveling takes a toll on your body, whether it is going from hot to cold climates or being in buses, planes, and automobiles where you might catch someone else's germs. You never know when you're about to get a cold.
Trust Zicam to knock out a cold at the first sign of it. Other cold medicines only mask symptoms, but Zicam is homeopathic and clinically proven to shorten colds when taken at the first sign. Find Zicam cold remedy products from rapid melts to elderberry medicated fruit drops at all major retailers, including Walmart. Zicam cold remedy products are safe and effective. Visit Zicam.com/wanderers to receive a $2 coupon on your next Zicam purchase. Once again, visit Zicam.com/wanderers to receive a $2 coupon on your next purchase.
Now back to the show. And one thing I'm curious about is when you're traveling, kind of whether it's at the start before you got to sailing, how did you decide when to move on from whether it's one place to the next, from one job to the next, or from one boat to the next? How did you kind of know, like, it's time for me to go, or how did you figure that out?
Itchy feet. Itchy feet. I don't know. So probably when you've been traveling for a while, you share this experience that somehow you've got an inner go, and that was sort of the same with me. You realize when you had enough at one place, or you realize when you don't have enough at one place yet, and you still want to stay. So that was my way of approaching this. When I wanted to stay, I stayed. When I wanted to leave, I went on. And starting like this, for about 1 year, I, let's say, followed my feelings. And then afterwards, I became actually more Christian over the whole journey. And to already provide this information, I'm now studying theology. And so after about 1 year, then also having this spiritual journey, let's say, I let myself be guided more by prayer and also listening, okay, God, where do you want me to go? And surprisingly, even though this sounds a little weird, but when you get to a lot of places where you think, okay, these doors are closed and there's no way I can continue, but I'm pretty sure this is the way, then a lot of doors opened up. And if you read my book, you can see a lot of these stories. That was actually, I didn't include as many of these stories in my book as I could have, because I thought if I do, provided like it really happened, and as much as it really happened, then it will somehow sound cheesy and no one will ever believe me. So I have to be careful how much of this I put in there. But yeah, it was a pretty amazing way for me to experience how it really feels to put yourself into God's hands and to trustfully do that, and to entrust yourself. And yeah, so even though looking on this trip from the outside, you may say, Christopher, you did a lot and you had a lot of strength and courage probably doing that. I, who did it, know that I didn't. I didn't have anything of this, but I really got a lot of strength and a lot of also guidance, let's say, through prayer. And this was something very strong for me. And the main reason I really started to pursue all this faith kind of stuff. Before that, I wasn't very much Christian, and before that, I wasn't very much interested in it. But because I realized how powerful it is, then that was the point where I said, okay, I really have to get to know a little bit more and start reading more about it. And now I'm studying theology.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that in your book you have a few different examples, but there were some you left out. Would you be open to sharing one of the ones that you left out, about like a time when it seemed like you're like kind of lost for direction and then an opportunity comes out of nowhere like that?
One of them I partly included was when I was in Vientiane in Laos, and I actually was there to apply for another visa to get back to Vietnam. I just came from Vietnam to Laos, and I wanted to get immediately back because I had a lot of friends there, and Chinese New Year was approaching, which is a great fest, and I wanted to get back there in time so I could spend the Chinese New Year with my friends. So now I was in Vientiane, at the capital of Laos, to get my Vietnam visa. And somehow already as I got into the city, I felt like this is a one-way ticket, sort of, even though I really had the intent to go back. But there was already this inner feeling. And then I got into the Vietnamese embassy in Vientiane, and right after I gave the officials my passport and paid the price so that they would issue the visa for me until the next day, I started to get to know a Polish couple. And so this small part is included in the book. And they told me, so we were starting to share our traveling routes and our intents, and they told me that the original way that I wanted to go via the country Myanmar to India is not possible anymore, because Myanmar has closed the borders to Thailand, and they changed the border rules every now and then. So at that point it was locked, so I couldn't continue my original ways, and the only way to get to India now was either via China, which is pretty difficult, or via the Indian Ocean, which is difficult too, but I was an experienced sailor by then, so I thought this might be my bet. And so then getting out that place, I sat into a cafe and was chatting with this girl from Germany who I had never met via internet, who later on became my wife. But at that point, we were already talking a lot, and I was telling her about this problem that came up, that Myanmar has now closed the borders, and that all my original traveling plans I have to recalculate right now. And then she said, okay, if you want to do it by sailing, then when is the sailing time? And I said, okay, you're right. So I checked the sailing time, and actually it started right at that day. And the sailing time via the Indian Ocean is just open for also about 1 or 2 months. And so that was exactly the perfect time frame. And then I told her, yeah, but I don't even have my passport, and it will take some time until they finish processing that. And while I was fighting with her, my sister, also in Germany, she had she hadn't written a message to me in a couple of months, but then wrote me a message, when do I come back home? And there were a lot of things piling up at this very small time frame, then in 2 or 4 hours, and the embassy had already closed meanwhile. But I knew if I wanted to continue, I needed my passport back. And yeah, I ended up telling Michael, the German person that I was writing with, okay, I go to the embassy, and if it really is like, if I can get my passport back in that time, I take it as a sign and I go south. And I'm confident that even though the little research that I did told me that no one had ever hitchhiked on a sailing boat from Thailand to India, and that the Indian regulations are very difficult, and that most sailing boats are not stopping there because of all these different regulations that you need, and the money you have to pay. So it's really just it's a really minority of people going there, and my chances, considering that, were not very good. But I said, okay, if I go to the embassy now, even though it's closed, and I can still get my passport back, even though I already paid the money, and they said they would issue it at express time and already take it away, then I take that as a sign that everything will work out. And so I got there, and they still haven't put my passport away. They still had it. And I took that and I went south. And it turned out that the 2 Russians that I was sailing with across the East Chinese Sea were actually right now in Phuket, this Thailand place where all the yachts would probably pass through on the way if they wanted to go to India. That's sort of one place where you would stop. Langkawi in Malaysia is the other place. I knew these big yachting places, and Langkawi and in Malaysia and Phuket in Thailand are the places you need to be. And in this place, Phuket in Thailand, were my 2 Russian friends, and one of them was even living there, having a small flat. So I even had a place to stay when I got there. And then pretty quickly, I got in touch with a German sailor who wanted to go to India. And so everything, again, seemed to be so easy. And if you just have one of these things, then it doesn't really feel like, let's say, guidance. But if you have all this piling up, and then once you walk the way, it becomes so smooth. A lot of times when I look into my diaries, it's really phenomenal how how first I was struggling, and then I write somehow whatever that I have a sign and a strong feeling, and sort of that things point into this direction, and that now I have the confidence that they will turn out well. And then later on, even though things look pretty bad, they do turn out well. I would describe it as a trampoline. So it feels like trampoline. If you fall, you immediately get back up onto your feet. And so, yeah, all of this came together. I've been talking for too long now. I'm sorry.
No. It's about this podcast is about you talking. So that was great. And thank you for sharing so much of that. I can definitely hear, all the different serendipitous moments that kind of happened. And obviously there had to be a lot of trust there to make that stuff happen. I'm curious, the planning aspect of this type of stuff, because it seems like there's not no planning that doesn't happen in order to make this type of trip happen. But at the same time, it seems like you have to be pretty flexible in a lot of ways as well. What was kind of your experience with balancing the planning aspect side of things?
Yeah, you have to be very flexible. Many times I got into a city probably at evening time, and I didn't even know where I would stay. I didn't even know how long I would stay, where I would go to from here. And this flexibility, again, opens up a lot of possibilities. If you're flexible, then you can react to the situation and the circumstances. And usually it wouldn't take me long to sort of build up a new existence at one place, just a couple of days. First, I would find a place to stay, or a place where I could put my hammock or my tent regularly when that is safe. And then probably find a place where I could access internet for free and get cheap food or water and all of that. Get to know people, make my way around. get to know the area and the exciting places to see and all of that. And when you are at one place and just ask people randomly on the street if they could recommend you any place to go, you will get a lot of good ideas. And sometimes the locals will advise you places that are really awesome that no tourists ever heard of, even and especially when it's not in a touristic area. And then you sort of make your own way to these places, and flexibility is the key. The best stories and the best moments and the best adventures you cannot plan. They just happen. And so to take one story in particular, that one didn't get into the book, but I wrote it down. And I wrote a lot more stories down than finally came into the book, with having in mind, okay, some we will need to throw out just to keep the best ones. So this may be not one of the better ones, but I will still tell it. I tell it anyway.
Sounds good.
At the border of Brazil, Venezuela, and English Guyana, there's a big mountain called Roraima. It's a flat-top mountain. So it's directly from the ground. The whole mountain goes about 2,800 meters up into the air, with a cliff in a 90 degrees angle on all sides. A real flat-top mountain. Probably reminds a little bit of the Rockies. But it's just this one gigantic mountain, flat top and very steep walls out of rock, just going straight down hundreds of meters. And it's a famous place to travel to, and also very costly if you want to go up there. This mountain inspired Arthur Conan Doyle, the famous author of Sherlock Holmes, to write The Lost World, which then later came into Jurassic Park, because he said, okay, if this mountaintop was isolated for thousands of years from the rest of the world, because nothing can get up and nothing can get down, probably there are still dinosaurs up there. And this whole idea sparked then the stories that came out of his feather. And so I really wanted to see this place and knew that I couldn't afford it, but still thought, okay, when they do have tourist plans and tourist groups going up there need to be people also bringing the cargo carriers, or the shepherds, Sherpers, I think, like this you pronounce it.
Sherpa.
Sherpa, right. These people, these guys, who bring the food up there for the tourists who pay these expensive trips. So if I just go there and I get to know some of them, probably I can join them and carry some up as well for free, and they will show me the right way to go, because if you don't go the right way, it may be dangerous. You may fall off the mountain and die. So I was certain, okay, I need to have some sort of guide. And I went to the closest village, which is called Paraitepui, and put up my tent there and got to know the people. And within a couple of days, opportunities opened up, and I ended up going up there with one of the Indios and one Brazilian who I met, who also had something similar in mind. And if you are open for this sort of opportunities to also make your own way, then usually you will have far greater experiences and cheaper as well than all of these trailblazed ways that youth hostels and tour agencies provide. And yeah, or let's take the story I was referring to earlier with Vietnam and Vientiane and the borders of Myanmar that closed up. So that basically changed my travel plans really a lot, but I still was sort of fine with it. It still worked out. And if you're not flexible enough, you will definitely not make your way around like that.
Yeah, and so one thing I'm curious about, Christopher, is I think a lot of people out there who are travelers, I think this is something like everyone goes through. It's kind of finding that balance between like being out of your comfort zone and getting off that beaten path with also like enjoying comforts. And so like there are so many great experiences and so many cool things that can happen and you can do when you say like show up somewhere without a plan and find the way to do something that typically is expensive in a different way. But I think people are like a bit nervous or afraid of it not working out. How did you kind of deal with that feeling, like kind of on your, you know, with that experience of being like, oh, maybe I should have something planned in advance? How did you kind of wrangle with that?
Yeah, so the first thing is really desire, knowing that I wanted this. And then the second is trust, having the confidence, okay, there will be a way. And even if I don't see one, I will just go in this direction and the way will open up. And this came through my faith, honestly. So this confidence really helped me. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have done that. And looking back, you almost after 4 years get into a rhythm of doing that. So even though it's uncomfortable every time, you know, okay, it will be uncomfortable for probably 2 or 3 days, and then the beginning will be hard to figure out. And even though after 1 year I sort of got to know a lot more tricks and yeah, you get more experience, and then this time will shorten up. It will be way longer in the very beginning if you do this for the first time. You get more experience, and then this time will shorten. But still, the first days are hard. You often without any clues and with a lot of closed doors, and still no possibility, it seems. But if you have the trust that if you keep on trying and keep on finding a way, and there must be one theoretically, and have the faith and the confidence, and probably also put in a little prayer, then things work out. Surprisingly, time and time again.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's something we've learned through our travels too. And especially travel's been so good for me because before I traveled, I was very like needed to be in control and plan everything. And there's just so many situations where you just kind of have to relinquish your control and just like, you know, trust that you're going to get where you need to go and everything's going to be okay. So yeah,
I'm a big fan of Elon Musk, who's got the Tesla company and SpaceX, Boring Company, OpenAI, and who was the guy who started PayPal and all of that, you name it. And one thing he keeps on saying at his presentations is that basically you can boil it all down to a few principles. And if these principles work out in theory, then even though probably no one has done it yet, there isn't a reason it can't work out in reality. So if you come from these very basic principles, like with me in the Roraima story, there are people going up there and there are people not paying anything when they are going up there, some of them even getting paid. So somehow there must be a way for me to also get into this place and this position. And what makes these people being in this position, then when you boil it down, it's just contacts, knowing the right people, getting along with the right people, and having the right price. They are these Sherpas. They are very cheap, and if you say, okay, I will help you out for free or something, then I don't see any reason why this shouldn't be possible. So if you boil it down to the very principles, very basic principles, even though people will tell you this is not possible, ask yourself, well, why shouldn't it? So if you think about it, when I was in Venezuela, I wanted to go to the Varao tribe, the Indios there in the middle of the jungle. There are no roads going there. It's just 1 or 2 days of motorboat that you need to have in order to get there. And when I first got into the area, the Venezuelans there told me, oh, there's a German having a youth hostel here, and probably you can ask him. He's your countryman, so he might help you out. And I went there and talked to this guy, and he was living there for 30 to 40 years in the same area. And he told me, how you think you're going to do this, going to the natives? I mean, first of all, the way is not accessible by land. You need a motorboat. and you don't have any motorboat, and then no one ever visits these guys, and we have an expensive tour that you can book. This is the way that I would recommend you, but otherwise, when you go there, why should they let you in to the community, and why should they be interested in you, and all sort of stuff like this. So this German guy was really a dream blaster, I would say, a destroyer. And then I thought about it, well, but somehow, of course, also these Indios, we're living in a globalized world, somehow they will have contact with the people here, the other Venezuelans, just to get rice or to get salt or probably some clothes or anything like that. So some of them, they surely must come to the accessible places where vendors can go. Somehow there must be some sort of trade system or whatever. And it turned out that some of them come these areas, but other opportunities for me were far better, because you also got missionaries going regularly into these areas, and it was Easter approaching. And they go there and bring them food, rice, and do some theater plays with them. Soap is very requested also, and basic medicine and all that sort of stuff. So I just joined one of these missionary groups, and then I got there, and I got a lot of food and small gifts with me, and then happened to stay at this Indio village for 1 month and got friends with them. And it turned out to be possible, even though this German guy living there for 30 to 40 years said it's not possible. But when you think about it, the basic principles don't speak against it, the basic realities, then you can find a way, even though nobody has gone it before. But that doesn't mean you can't.
Yeah. Wow. I love your determination and just being able to like, I think a lot of people would just be like, oh, okay, I guess like can't go there, maybe just move on or pay for the tour if they could and that sort of thing. And I think it's really amazing that you kept looking for other ways to get there and then were able to have that experience. Something that I'm curious about is your book. We've had a chance to check out a good chunk of it. I'm not quite finished yet, but I am going to finish it because it's really, really awesome. But I'm curious when you decided to write the book. Like, was it an idea you had when you first set out, or did it kind of become something that you decided you wanted to do after you got home, or what was that process like?
When I started, a lot of people told me, Christopher, you need to write a diary, because in case you ever want to write a book, then you do have the content and you won't be able to remember everything if you don't write a diary. And my answer always was, I will write a diary, but just to remember everything, because I want to remember it, but not to write a book. I've always been pretty bad in my German classes and didn't have the best grades in there, and I didn't really like the subject, and I don't even really like writing. So I said, no, writing a book is probably going to be the last thing I would ever do. And then about 2 years into my travel, now having had all these experiences, when I was in a time of prayer, I sort of had this feeling, okay, now I did this more or less selfish travel for 2 years. And I was always trying to help others on the way and be generous and wherever I could, and also help out for free and all this. But still, I did this whole thing for my own sake, to fulfill my own dream. And I said, okay, what about sharing these experiences with others who can probably not go out and who would be interested in the countries and the adventures and the cultures, but cannot afford out of financial reasons or health reasons to do this kind of journey. And I want to enable them to somehow travel with me and give a little bit back and help the world to grow together a little bit more by letting people see that people on the other side of the earth are just the same as you are. And yeah, then I started to write this book out of this prayer initiative when I had these thoughts that I should write the book. And for me, every time sitting down to write a few more pages was like writing a paper for university. You really don't like doing it, but you still do it because in that time you have to. And for me, it was somehow, let's say, sort of worship. I was always saying, okay, I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for other people. And I know it's the right thing to do. So I'm doing it, even though I don't like writing. But I started reading through a lot of blogs and books and whatever to learn how to write. It's sort of a craft. You can learn how to play an instrument. You can learn how to write. And I did that. And then I had my diary. All my diary entries, and I used this information and then the upcoming experiences to write the book down. And I started on the Fiji Islands 2 years into my travel, and I finished about 80% when I got back home. There you see, I'm not a very talented writer. Some people, they sit down and they just pour it out, and I myself, I had to think about every single sentence. This is why it took me some time to finish it. 300 pages is a lot when you're not used to it and when you're not really seeing yourself as a professional or talented writer. But then once I got back, finishing the next 20% within the next half year, surprisingly, once it got published, it went straight into the bestsellers of Germany. And even though I had never thought it would, and even though the media publicity wasn't as big as it could have been, it stayed there within the bestsellers for far over a year now. So the hardcover version has been within the top 10 bestsellers of Germany for 66 weeks. And the paperback version has been in the bestsellers for probably 12 or 13 weeks. It got to be number 10 best-selling books of the year 2018, which is then also why it's been translated into 9 different languages. And for me, this is just mind-blowing and also very ironic, because I don't consider myself being a writer, but somehow this really was a golden shot.
Yeah, that's amazing, and congratulations on all the success. I know as I was Googling for the book earlier this morning, since we're in Panama right now, so the first result that came up on Google was the Spanish version, which I think was like Alrededor del Mundo or something like that.
Yeah,
so
Alrededor del Mundo con 50 euros.
Yeah. That's so awesome, and it's so cool how the journey worked out and how everything has worked out. And I feel like we could just keep talking for hours, so we want to be respectful of your time. And so I guess we'll leave it to people to go out and check out the book. Like Amanda said, we've been reading it and really, really enjoying it around the world on $50 or 50, I think it's 50 euros.
The book will be better than the stories that I told today. I chose the wrong stories. I should have chosen some more exciting ones. I'm sorry, but you can read it or listen to it.
It's fascinating, and it's great to get to know you as well and get to know kind of more of your thoughts and personality as well in addition. So thank you so much. And where should people go if they want to connect with you, if they want to find out more about you? In addition to checking out the book, where else should they go online?
I do have an Instagram account. It's Christopher Schacht all together and the dash at the bottom. But you can just Google it. And first of all, Google the book. Then you will see my name. And from there on, my Instagram account, my YouTube account. And that's the main way that I relate to the public on social media, though I have to admit I'm not very consistent in doing so yet. I will publish a lot more content within the next few years. That's at least my plan, and what I'm preparing to probably even get a podcast and all of this. But right now, with university, having a wife, and still doing a lot of other projects aside that, not yet, but I'm getting there.
Life is busy.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Christopher. This has been so awesome and so inspiring, and we're excited to continue to follow along with your journey.
Yeah. Wow. So I wish you all the best and good luck and safe travels, Godspeed in Panama. Great experiences for you. And
thank you.
Yeah, until then.
To find more information, relevant links, and photos talked about in this week's episode, check out theworldwanderers.com.
If you have a question, comment, or feedback, send us an email at info@theworldwanderers.com. Join our community on Facebook at The World Wanderers or on Twitter at World Wanderers 1. As always, thanks so much for listening.
Have a great day.
Bye.